This episode of Made in America TV is brought to you by America's Inventor League and HomeTalkUSA. HomeTalk is a proud member of the King's Broadcasting Network, which has been bringing you the best in home-based innovation since 1998.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us for this episode of Made in America.
Welcome back, everybody, to Home Talk USA on the King Broadcasting Network. This is the Made in America Hour, and I'm your host, Greg Owens, here with John Gardner, author of the book, Manufacture Local, How to Make America the Manufacturing Superpower of the World. Before we get with John, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsor for this segment, Bond Products. For DIY carpet binding, there is only one Instabind. You can find it at bondproducts.com. John, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me again, Greg.
I appreciate your coming right off of a vacation and making time for us this morning. I know that first day back can be a little busy, right?
Oh yeah, but this is always fun. So
yeah. Well, I thought what we'd do, you wrote an interesting book, and we've had you on the show before and we've talked about it, but a lot of people out there probably haven't heard those episodes. So, starting out, chapter 1, what happened to American manufacturing? If you could just sort of run through that real quick.
Well, I think what happened to all of American economic mentality was Milton Friedman's book, Capitalism and Freedom. And that changed our university's thought pattern and everything we taught and approached to unilateral free trade, meaning that we can, that even if other countries tariff us at 100, 150%, it's better for us, we were told, to tariff at 0. And Milton Friedman even said, and this is an exact quote from him, it's demeaning for America to tariff other nations. And that... So I think we've been brainwashed in our schools on the right and the left to assume that this mentality is correct and never to question it. And those who do question it are hit with the kind of mantra, well, Milton Friedman said, and I have a personal problem when people just say somebody said this, so it makes it right. So part of my book is the question why we started to think offshoring our manufacturing was good for national security, was good for our middle class. Because the manufacturing industry and industrial might are what have built great powers and great middle classes throughout history. So I really wanted to write a book that was accessible to every single American. I just read an interesting statistic today that 8 out of 10 Americans do not understand or know anything about the manufacturing industry. And so I wrote my book specifically in a way that anybody could read it. 80-year-old grandma or a 8th grade kid could read it. And it's filled with anecdotes from my life, and it's easily digestible to help every American understand that producing a product is the most important thing for our economy and our national security, and we need to keep that within our borders as much as we can.
Yeah, and back to Milton Friedman and even Adam Smith, the father of capitalism. These guys sort of live in a world of academia, and within that world, it's sort of this ideal thing that doesn't exist. And if you talk to people who have studied and understand trade, and I think you're one of those people, you realize that there really is no such thing as free trade. Every country has, including the United States to a certain extent, has not only tariffs, but non-tariff barriers and value-added or ad valorem taxes and all sorts of rules and regulations that protect their own markets, and it's anything but free and fair. Isn't that correct?
100%. And I think the name of Milton Friedman's book, Capitalism and Freedom, let's diagnose those two words. First of all, capitalism is when you sell something of value, right? You don't give it away for free. Yet we have a golden market and we are giving away access to our market for free. How does it benefit us to not have a tariff on Suriname, who we don't care about their market, but they want to be in our market because we have a huge market. We have the largest consumer market on the planet. How does that benefit our nation to give, Suriname access, or Panama or some small market free access? So you sell something of value with capitalism. And another note on the other part of the book title, Capitalism and Freedom, on freedom. What is more free for the American citizen? To have tariffs that replace income tax, which is how America functioned for 140 years, right? There was no income tax up till 1913, and up until World War II, it was 1% to 6% income tax, right? And all the federal government's bills were paid with tariffs. So what is more free? We've been told that it is more free for American citizens to have businesses overseas with slave labor and strip mine and bad environmental products penetrate our market so we get cheaper goods. We've been told that's freedom. But I want to argue that point. And I think true freedom is to have our income tax paid with tariffs. And so that our revenue as a citizen that we earn, our income, is not subject to taxes. That to me is true freedom. And that's what I argue in this book. And that's why I created the term the External Revenue Service. And I think every American on the left and right and middle should be questioning Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell and all these icons of economy, because their ideas work in a perfect world in a classroom, but when you get out in the real world, they don't work. And these guys lived in a classroom, and we all followed their lead to our detriment.
Yeah, and you go to people that are currently in politics, sort of the last stragglers of the globalist movement. I'll point out Rand Paul, who has some very libertarian views on trade. And not that I disagree at all with everything that the libertarians would say, but their position on trade is basically get the government out of the way and let everybody do what they want to do, take away all the tariffs, all the regulations, and let it flow into our country. Well, if everybody did that, maybe that would be okay. But the reality of the situation outside of that ideological classroom is that other countries put up all these barriers. And if you do that, you're just setting yourself up to get ripped off, which is really what Trump, I think, is that the term he used, ripped off, for years. And that's what's been going on. And it's time to put an end to that. And I think we're on the path to do that, right?
I do. And I think changing the mentality of Americans from what they've been taught and told to believe is so important. And so we support future presidents and future congressmen. And on the Rand Paul note, Larry Elder is a friend of mine, and he's a famous libertarian, and he hated tariffs. And he'd always say to me, "Oh, Milton Friedman this, Thomas Sowell that." Well, he read my book, and he told me the other day, he's like, "I've changed my mind on tariffs. I've rethought a lot of my assumptions." And to me, that was a very proud moment, because that was the exact goal and purpose of my book, is to get people who believe this to change their thought pattern.
All right. Well, we're going to have to take a quick break here in a minute. But what I want to do is come back and talk to you a little bit more about the book, and expand on some of these comments and get into some of the other sections. This is Home Talk USA. This is the Made in America Hour. We will be right back. Back, everybody, to Home Talk USA here on the King Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Greg Owens, and this is the Made in America Hour. We're here with John Gardner. Before we get back with John, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsor for this segment, Lion Energy. You can go anywhere with portable power solar generators. Find them at lionenergy.com. John, welcome back. And when we left off, we were talking about some of the ideology that gets involved, and how it flies in the face of the reality of what we're seeing. Kind of going into the next section of the book, why do we care? Why make it in America? And I know you have some great thoughts on that.
Well, manufacturing has built the greatest middle classes in history. The manufacturing industry, for every dollar spent, generates $2.86 for the economy, giving it the highest multiplier effect of any sector of the economy. And this is from a Defense Department study in 2021. Also, you want to be able to produce the things, the bare necessities that your nation and national defense needs, rather than going to your strategic adversary like China, as we currently are. But I also think that the manufacturing industry right now needs to reintroduce itself to Americans, and everybody on the news, most of the people in the media and politics and academia have never worked in our industry. Greg, in your industry too, and it makes me sad. We need to see more voices for the manufacturing industry in media, in politics, people who have actually worked in it, not just talk about it. And I'd like to see us giving a bigger platform, and I'd like to see the next generation of youth see these facilities of today, how they're clean, and how they're not the industries of yesteryear with black smoke billowing out of the factory top. They're very high tech, and manufacturing is going to boom in a high tech, automated AI way. And we need our youth to realize they don't need a college debt to join this industry. And really, the manufacturing industry provides hope and opportunity in the stepping stones up the rung of the ladder of economic opportunity. And that's really what I'm most excited to see.
Yeah, and to all the young people out there listening, you're thinking about, do I go out and get a college degree? And they're sort of on the fence and don't really know what they want to spend all those tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on. A 2-year degree in mechatronics can open up the window to a wonderful career in manufacturing. And we're talking about jobs that start off in the $30 to $35 an hour range and go up from there with expertise, right? These are not welcome to Walmart, here's your shopping cart jobs, right?
100%. And I think we need to stop talking about the manufacturing industry as the economy as a whole. And to give you a perfect example on tariffs, you all know I'm a big tariff fan. But right now, tariffs on machine tools, like manufacturing CNC mills and lathes from Germany, who make some of the best right now, will have a large tariff on it. And I have friends of mine who are like, hey, listen, I need to be able to purchase this machine. The manufacturing industry is treated the same as a consumer product, the same as retail. And it should be separated off, not just with tariffs, but with lending as well. To get back to my point, for example, my buddy needs to purchase this machine, a Hermele, from Germany, because it's the only machine that can hold the tolerances that he needs to create military parts. The American machines can't hold these tolerances. And yet he has to face a tariff to buy this machine. Whereas we should say, what Peter Navarro should do and say is like, hey, we're going to give a year exemption until we can build machine manufacturing, the machine tool manufacturing capability here in America. We'll give you a year. Here's the deadline. Instead, the manufacturing industry is clumped together with, clothes or, olive oil or whatever. And it needs to be treated differently. As far as lending, we hear all this rhetoric from the SBA as far as Kelly Loeffler saying, oh, we're doing all this stuff for the manufacturing industry. Guess what? They're not. I just tried to get a loan to buy my office unit here. And I talked to 4 different bankers. I asked them, have you received any guidance that treats the manufacturing industry any different from me than any other industry, like a McDonald's or franchise or a mom and pop clothes store or something? They've received zero guidance. The only change that the SBA has made for manufacturers is to raise the cap from borrowing for 5 to 10 million, which doesn't really help a small manufacturer that much. And let's remember that 90% of manufacturers are 50 employees or less. So they don't need a $5 or $10 million loan. Most of them don't. So really, there's a lot of rhetoric right now, and there's no voice of wisdom from within the industry to the administration. As much as I love Peter Navarro, he's been in academia his whole life. He's never worked in our industry. I have all the respect in the world for the guy, but we need to get some voices from within the industry into the administration.
Well, that's what we try and do with our work through CPA. Myself in particular, I know you've participated in some things, is there are a lot of lawyers and there are a lot of politicians involved in that. And they've never really, they're at lefty, loosey, righty, tighty, they really don't know anything about making anything. And, to try and give them, I call it from the trenches input into what they're trying to do, things that are actually going to make a difference. But one of the things that I loved about your book is, and you mentioned this earlier, is that it's so easy to read. And for a lot of people out there listening today, they don't really know a whole lot about manufacturing, So where do we find your book, and how can we get, and by the way, this is it's a thin paperback book. It's an easy read. You could bang it out, in a day, very easily. And it's written in such a way that it doesn't, there's not tables and graphs and all sorts of math and E equals MC squared. It's very easy to understand, and it will really help the readers and the audience that's listening to us today. Hopefully you'll go out there and get it. Understand these issues and how to cut through some of the rhetoric that you see in the press and really understand the issue at its core. So, John, where do we find the book?
If you put a manufacturer local John Gardner into Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Walmart, it's everywhere online as far as those larger platforms you can order it from. And I appreciate you recognizing that there wasn't a lot of graphs and charts. I didn't have any of that in my book because I wanted to be stories from my own life that people can relate to in the history I grew up around of manufacturing in Pittsburgh and watching Pittsburgh fall. From 1980 to 1985, we lost from 1980 to 1983, we lost 150,000 steel mill jobs in Pittsburgh. From 1983 to 1985, we lost another 100,000 peripheral jobs. By 1990, 60% of the population of Pittsburgh had left the city because the jobs are all gone. That's one city in America. And luckily, Pittsburgh has been able to rebuild itself. But you look at Baltimore and Detroit and Chicago, and was that considered, was this economic loss for the middle class considered when Milton Friedman did his theories on economy? And I don't think it was. I don't think losses were accounted for.
And, the gamesmanship that's been going on, and I get Milton Friedman's economies of scale, but manufacturing used to make up about 30% of the workforce in the United States. Today, the last statistic I heard, it's below 8%. And it at that point becomes this national security and economic security crisis, because if a nation can't be self-sustaining and make the things that they need in order to survive, that makes them really dependent on others. And we're seeing that with these trade negotiations, particularly with China, aren't we?
Yeah, 100%. A very good example of what you just described is, I reference it in my book, is that the U.S. Navy stopped making torpedoes from 1996 to 2016. When the Trump administration came in and said, hey, we want to make torpedoes again. It took them 2 years till 2018 to figure out how to manufacture torpedoes again. And I referenced I think the admiral who was asked about it, he's like, we just learned one thing: we never want to stop making it again, because it took them 2 years is half the time it took to fight and win World War II. Our industrial power is in our human capital of knowledge and ability to make things. And that's a frightening example of when you stop making stuff, it becomes a death spiral for a nation and an economy, because we literally cannot make some things right now, and we don't have the human capital that even knows how. And that's a very scary place for a nation to be.
Right. And picture yourself as Donald Trump sitting there in the White House, and he likes to say, I want this done, and I want it done on Trump time, which means tomorrow. And for somebody to come back to him and say it's going to be 2 years before we can make a torpedo without relying on China or some of the other trading partners that may not be very friendly during a time of conflict, that's got to be very frustrating for him and for others. But it's a question of putting it all together, right? I mean, you have to get the SBA back down to earth and doing things that are actually going to help. So we've got to take a quick break now, and then we'll be back with John. This is Home Talk USA on the King Broadcasting Network. We'll be right back with more of the Made in America Hour. Welcome back, everybody, to the King Broadcasting Network, Home Talk USA. This is the Made in America Hour. I'm your host, Greg Owens, here with John Gardner, author of the book Manufacturer Local: How to Make America the Manufacturing Superpower of the World. We'll get John back on here in just a second, but before we get to that, I'd like to give a shout out to Aztec Washer, our sponsor for this segment. Revolutionary and innovative roofing products since 1968. I love their motto: seal it right, seal it tight. You can find them at aztecwasher.com. Well, John, welcome back. And let's wrap up the conversation real quickly about this concept of national security. And most people think about that as being just the military and the torpedoes you were talking about, but economic security as well. Prescription drugs, something we've had Rosemary Gibson, who I believe you've met, on the show, talking about how we depend on other nations, most namely India and China, for the majority of our prescription drug active ingredients. And if we were to be cut off for some reason, within 6 weeks, our hospitals would start running out of key medications from antibiotics and beyond. We wouldn't be able to perform surgeries. It would be a national crisis. What do you know about that subject, and what do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's horrible. I think it shows the flaw in free trade theory, and I think that it shows how stupid the path that our nation has been led down is. And I think we need to reshore it as fast as possible. The thing about that dynamic that upsets me the most is it was found, I think Rosemary brought it up, that these medication manufacturing facilities in China and India were given waivers even after, by the FDA, even after massive abuses were found and poisoned lots or whatever, all the flaws that were found, they were given waivers to continue to do stuff. Now, if that happened in America, the facility would be shut down, there'd be fines, there'd be all kinds of issues. The same thing with slave labor. If you go over to China, you can find companies that use sweatshop or slave labor or forced labor making products that come here to America, and nothing's done about it. It's talked about, nothing's done. Why don't America's laws and morals apply to companies that want to penetrate our market? The hypocrisy of it is really what sickens me, and I think we need to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, is this concept of unilateral free trade worth the moral soul of our nation to allow other nations to make things with slave labor and then sell them in our market, or to make flawed goods and give them waivers while American companies have to follow hard laws? It seems absurd to me.
Yeah, but and beyond that, I mean, even if it isn't some nefarious thing where they're skipping tests, you're taking a statin, you're taking some other sort of heart medication. What if it doesn't work? What if the dose is more than it's supposed to be and it's not consistent from batch to batch? The testing, we've been cut off from the testing of this. And the FDA has no way of testing every batch of every medicine, particularly the generics that come into our country. So it's time to seize control of this and other issues. But we've had you on, and we always fall short in the last chapter in your book, which I absolutely love. And it's a manufacturing campaign for America, right? It's getting the word out beyond what your book says and doing things like they happen. Give the example of what used to happen and how the government used to promote American manufacturing on the airwaves, TV and radio.
Yeah, you look back at the marketing campaigns of the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you see all this glorification and positive propaganda regarding the manufacturing industry and being in the manufacturing industry, especially during World War II. I think we've all seen, these posters of like, produce. Your hard work puts a bullet in the hands of the soldiers, all kinds of positive reinforcement. And I can't think of any ad or company that promotes their manufacturing in a positive way right now. And, government funding can and should be used for this to draw in the next generation of manufacturing workers. I mean, we have government funded campaigns for COVID, for monkeypox awareness, goofy stuff like that. We should be educating our youth that there is a path within the manufacturing industry where they can make six figures in not too long of a time if they just get involved. And again, it's that awareness of there's an industry that I can do before I have to join college.
John, you just put a smile on my face. I was laughing out loud. I had to mute. Monkeypox awareness, is that a thing?
Oh yeah, don't you remember? Yeah, of course. Yeah, that was a thing. Yeah, I saw billboards for it all over Los Angeles, and they're all over up and down the 405 freeway. There'd be like, yeah, it's kind of disturbing. And so the government, if it wants to have human capital that can make products and for national security and to have a strong economy, we have to tell these kids and the populace that this industry needs workers. There is a study by Deloitte Institute of Manufacturing that showed by 2030 we'd be short 2.1 million manufacturing jobs. With Trump's push, that could be 5 million jobs that will go unfilled because the skilled labor isn't there. And so we need to start drawing these kids in now in high school and educating them about a really good career path that awaits them.
Well, we need to get on an airplane and fly down to D.C. and tell our president that and Peter Navarro and the rest of the people in the White House that we need a massive PR campaign to cut through a lot of the BS and the nonsense in the press and really help enlighten, I'm not going to say educate, but enlighten the American people as to the real issues that we face, and the challenges that we face, and get the American people behind an effort to not only address some of the political issues that we face, but to help themselves out by providing themselves and their kids with great paying jobs in what used to be a wonderful sector of our economy.
And I see a MTV music video style campaign with the slogan, "Build strong families, build a strong nation." Join the manufacturing industry today, with very cool music, Michael Bay directed music video, type stuff, showing how awesome the manufacturing industry is, what you're making. I have a worker for me that works on all kinds of cool stuff. So,
well, we've done it again, John. We've run out of time. We'll have to have you back again. This is Home Talk USA on the King Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Greg Owens, here on the Made in America Hour. Look forward to seeing you again next week.